Every week we do a Q&A with interesting and accomplished members of the adaptive community to find how they persevered, how they innovated, how they built communities, and how they found solutions. Welcome to the Nametags Chat Podcast.
Welcome to the Nametags Chat Podcast, where we celebrate stories of resilience. We're talking with Adam Bleakney, who helps guide people through their stories of resilience. Silver medalist in his own right in the 800 in Sydney. He has led 44 medals, right? From not 44 athletes, but 44 medals in 3 Paralympic Games. So almost 15 medals from the University of Illinois in each of the last 3 Paralympic Games. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to be here.
This is awesome. I love what you're doing with the track guys. I've got to go back a little bit though, just to you and figure out some of the mentality, because you were definitely one of the toughest guys on the track. I mean, it's just like you never stopped, you never quit. Is that a wrestling mentality? Because you were wrestling in college, right? Did you bring that mentality to wheelchair racing?
Yeah. So that was my former life. Yeah, as wrestling. I think so. Certainly to training and just the this idea of probably not a very good philosophy to have in racing. But if I wasn't suffering and bleeding a little bit, then I probably wasn't working hard enough and doing what I need to do to win. so yeah, I've grown out of that as I've aged. I certainly don't coach that way, but yeah, that was certainly was my intent was always that if I lost a race, and I lost, it wouldn't be because the person that beat me didn't suffer a little bit, and so and I think I always prided myself, certainly as in reference to the 800 meter silver. That was the idea, was that I was going to go out off the front and beat myself into the ground, and if anybody was able to beat me, then I'd tip my hat to them. So,
and I remember listening that you just let up just a moment in that 800, and that's when Coleman went by you. Is that how that worked?
Yeah, he did. He got me just by inches, but and he was young. He was young, and I think that was his first games, if I'm not mistaken, and really talented young man, and a great sprinter, and knew what he had to do, and he executed it. So as
we've lost sound. Can you still hear me?
Oh, I got you. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Did that break out?
It broke out a little bit. Yeah. So I don't know what happened.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Sorry.
So what you learned as an athlete, I would imagine, I mean, one, you were able to work with Marty Morse, right? Who's one of, if not probably the greatest wheelchair track coach. So you learned from the best, but then you also learned, as you said, you learned some painful lessons as an athlete. Taking both of those perspectives, how has that shaped the way that you work as a coach?
Yeah. Certainly Marty was a significant influence in how I coach, and certainly the foundational knowledge of training methodology, and then was tied directly to Marty, and I have no academic degrees in sports science or kinesiology. I'm an English lit major, and I got my master's degree in journalism. But I always felt like I got another degree, informal degree, in an apprenticeship under Marty, and so I was always really curious as to the why and the methodology behind the training, and why are we training this way on Monday and this way on Wednesday, and why are these workouts they seem to have some linear relationship to this workout, and why is that? And I always felt that the more informed I was as an athlete, then the better an athlete I could be. And Marty was a great teacher, and so he enjoyed talking through the process, and he had a library of books on his shelf in his office, and he'd give me a book to read, and I'd read it, and we'd discuss it, or he'd share articles in the research, read through and discuss. And I think just for me, it was a curiosity and just to have an understanding of the logic and as I said, the methodology behind the process of training and skill acquisition. Yeah, but then I think too, as you said, pointing to, I learned a lot too from in terms of with racing from my peers and from all the athletes that I competed against, trained with, yourself included. And I think one of the richest experiences I had was living in Atlanta after I graduated from with my master's degree. I moved down and to Atlanta and trained almost on a daily basis with Scott Hollenbeck, and he is such a rich resource of knowledge and there aren't very many better tacticians than Scott, and so to be on the track with him training, as I said, really on a daily basis for 2 years. I mean, that was such a huge influence and opportunity for me. But also, I've always, my mentality always is that there's always another piece of information to learn. And so you're open and receptive to that information, and you have to have a filter too. So you have to filter out the information that may not be useful. But I think if you position yourself in that mindset, then you open the opportunity to learn new things, because there's always new things to be learned. And I mean, the often said is that, the longer that you're in it, the less that you know, and it can't be more true. I mean, it's been a continuing process from when I started in the sport in 1995 to this point.
What was this year like? This had to be a crazy year to be a coach.
Yeah, it was very unique in respect from the time we went in under lockdown in March of 2020. Really through the last month when we didn't have any competitions for the athletes to key on, and which meant from a training standpoint, the way you organize the training typically keys off of competitions, and so this was unique for me in terms of organizing and applying training loads to the athletes without my typical seasonal structure to work off of and my typical quad structure to work off of. And so my approach was to use that as an opportunity to train for us December, January, February, March. So during those months, and certainly more so in January through March, we do a lot more volume and a little more intensity too in terms of how that matches into the volume, with the idea that the athletes will be a little fatigued, and that's okay. And primarily because during that time we don't necessarily have any competitions in which they need to be a little less fatigued and a little sharper for. And so really that's what it became. It became an extended off season to dig in and develop what I thought were some opportunities for improvement for each of the athletes. And but that's not to say it was easy. It's difficult when you don't have that more near term race to key on and lock in on as an athlete. But I'll say that the athletes that really bought in and dug in and anchored themselves in the foundational work, they've thrived and they're very much benefited in the past month.
Well, you have some great athletes. So Daniel Romanchuk is one of your athletes, and back in back in Rio, back before Rio, I heard you say that he was going to be the greatest or one of the greatest wheelchair athletes. And in Rio, he did similar to what he might do in Tokyo, where 100, 200, or 100, 400, 800, 1500, 5000, and the marathon. But he didn't make any finals in Rio, whereas we assume that he will make at least some, if not all of the finals, and potentially, I mean, he's a potential winner in any one of those races where he gets to the line. What made you say back then that he was going to be one of the greatest ever, or possibly did you say the greatest, or do you remember?
No, I don't. I'd typically hedge on things like that, and I would say one of, one of, yeah. But he certainly is incredibly talented, and so I've known him since I think he was 16. I'm terrible with remembering dates and times, but he moved out to Champaign as so we're the University of Illinois. We're the U.S. Olympic Paralympic Committee national training site for wheelchair track, and as such, we're able to bring in athletes like Daniel, who we think have potential, and they can spend time training, and so I agree. So Kathy Sellers, who was our performance director at the time, had asked me, "Hey, what do you think about having Daniel come out and do some training with you?" And of course, I agreed. I knew he was a great young man and had a great family, so I knew he would fit in well with the team. So he moved out, and so I said, well, I didn't realize he was moving here. But they would stay for an extended periods of time, and he would train with the team, which was welcome, and we we've enjoyed having him as he's moved into from that age into now college age. So, anyways, that doesn't answer your question. I think what I saw, and really, I mean, it wasn't just me. I think anyone who watched him on a daily basis knew at some point he was going to achieve a really high ceiling of performance, and the most distinguishing factor is his wingspan, which I mean, it's almost 7 foot, but
Why
then
is that significant in a wheelchair?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that
It
significant?
is, yeah. So what that allows it's so it creates a longer lever arm and allows him to. And I'm not a physicist, but it allows him to apply force more effectively. And what that then does too is allows him to run a larger hand ring diameter and use it effectively. So it's so anyone like you or I could run a 17 and a half inch hand ring, but we wouldn't really be able to use it optimally. It just wouldn't match up well with the ratio of our limb length. But because I think you have about the same size arms as me, so which is about a 14 and a half inch, tailored for suited for about a 14 and a half inch hand ring. So Daniel uses 17 and a half inch hand rings, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what he's on now. But what that allows him to do is he's able to effectively and actively apply force to the wheel longer per each revolution of the wheel than anyone else in the world. So I don't know if I say that in a way that makes sense, but he's actively applying force for more distance than anyone else in the world is. So if you have you have a 14 and a half inch ring and you're pushing half of the circumference, the distance you travel per active contact is going to be less than Daniel, who's pushing half the circumference or a little bit more of a 17 and a half inch ring, right? So that's one piece. I mean, there's more to it than that, obviously, right? It's a matter of distance over time, but
It's
being
also
able
like
to
being in different gear too, right? So to use like the
Mhm.
bike analogy, where wheelchair racing, you have one gear. It's why it's
Right.
analogous to running. So you have
Right.
one gear, this push ring and the
Right.
relationship between a 14 and a half, 15-inch push ring to a 27-inch wheel
Right.
means that it's kind of like you're in like fifth gear
Mm-hmm.
all the time kind of thing.
Right.
It's fifth gear on the
Right.
flats, it's fifth gear going up, it's fifth gear going down, where Daniel might well be in like third gear
Uh-huh.
kind of thing. So it's
Right.
easier, and he climbs like a madman, which is not just the push ring by any means, but
No, 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 no. So he, yeah. So what we've, let me see what so if you could, so let's say I have an athlete who is suited for a 14 and a half inch ring, and we have the, the, uh, the measuring point we use is a measurement from, I'll show you my hand. It's from the knuckle of the middle finger to the head out of the radius, so right where the elbow hinges. So we take a measurement of that segment, and then we use that as a baseline to determine hand ring size. And so for Daniel, because that segment is so long, then we know we can put him on a larger hand ring size, and he's still able to use it effectively. So if someone has shorter arms, I mean, we can still put them on a 18-inch hand ring, but they're not going to be able to use it very effectively. One, they're not probably going to be able to access the back and the bottom of the ring, which is a key point. But then two, what we found is they just can't produce enough linear hand velocity to appropriately apply force to the linear velocity of the rotating hand ring. So linear velocity meaning how fast is this any point moving in a straight line. And again, I'm not a this is not my, I'm just a hack on this stuff. But basically what you'll find is for athletes that try to move up in a ring size, they just can't keep up with the linear speed of the hand ring in a way that allows them to continually apply force that's allowing them to create effective forward propulsion. Whereas Daniel can, because he matches up perfectly. It's no different than an athlete who has who's suited for 13-inch hand rings being on a 13-inch hand ring on the wheel. So hopefully I explained that in a way
no,
that
it's good.
does make some sense. Yeah.
It's good. One of the things that I watched that he did so well at the trials was, and this was particularly like he went off on his own on the 800. And so he did the turn where you do the turn in your lane. And then when he got to the straightaway, you could see that it was just this generation of power. I mean, it was just like coming off. It was just, you could see the acceleration, but it wasn't typical of the way that we look at wheelchair racers, where the elbows come up so much higher when you get into that acceleration. You know, when you're accelerating, he literally, it just seemed like it happened in the middle of the stroke that he was able to transfer all of the power. So it wasn't like coming from up high and then punching into the ring to get that power.
Right.
That power was created when his hand was already on the ring. Is that fair to say? Is that something that is actually true?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's on point. And he's, he's noteworthy in that if you watch him pushing at 17 miles an hour and you watch him pushing at 20 miles an hour, you can't really tell the difference. I mean, they both look fast, but actually one of his teammates and competitors, Aaron Pike, we joke about it that the only way I can tell that Daniel's going faster is I see how slow everybody else is going once he accelerates. Otherwise, if you just watch his biomechanics, there isn't a distinct difference between the two. And he reminds me of Solo Mendoza, who's the great champion from Mexico. I always see similarities in that when I watch Saul push, and he had a much higher amplitude in his recovery than Daniel does, just because one, his seating position was different. He was using a different type of gloves, but where it was the same, the velocity was there, but the biomechanics were still very, very smooth. And that's one of the key points that we train, and not just Daniel, but with all the athletes, when I do stroke analysis, I really only look at how the hand interfaces with the hand ring, with the understanding that there's a point in that stroke I call it the power position, and I can move either forward or backward from that position and have a pretty good idea of what the athlete's doing, and during the rest of each stroke cycle. And so, as we've moved into, obviously the gloves and the chairs and seating position have changed, but I think notably the use of a particular style of glove has become a little more common. Certainly on my team, we've gone almost exclusively to a glove style that positions the thumb in this position, the fingers in this position, and that was brought to me by Gude Kim. He's a South Korean athlete who's been a student here in my program. He's a multi-medalist at the Paralympic Games. He was third in the marathon, third in the 1500 in Rio, and outstanding athlete and another great resource. Again, as I say, that you never stop learning and picking up on opportunities for improvement, and certainly from the standpoint of a contact angle on the glove that is incredibly effective. And we attribute that to the knowledge that's come from GD. We call him Gude is his name. We call him GD. But anyways, so this glove style just allows you to interface with the hand ring a little bit differently, different than and I don't know, because I know you've pushed a little bit more recently, but I know for the longest time you used a soft mitt that used a flat style of pushing and to interface the hand with the hand ring. And we've come into where we've used this style. I guess you can kind of see it. And what it allows you to do is opens up the wrist and allows you to be a lot more dynamic in the way you apply a force on the hand ring. And so what we key in on, I used to always teach that when you release the hand ring, the idea is just don't slow it down. Don't put a braking force on it. You've done all this work to make effective, clean contact, and then driving around the ring to release. Just get off the ring quick and clean. But now we've really gone to the point where we don't just want to get off clean. I want a little bit more force application in the last 2 to 3 hours of the stroke. And that comes by virtue of, as a reverse clock face. So we want to try to get really dynamic movement from about 6 o'clock all the way to 8 o'clock on the ring. And that comes via this interface with the glove and the hand ring that allows the wrist to be a lot more mobile and dynamic and much more ballistic in terms of how it can interact with the hand ring, not only through the initial contact with the ring, but through the driving portion of the ring and into release. And so that's a lot of what you see when you don't necessarily see a change in the amplitude of the elbows or increase in the separation between the hand and the hand ring. We're just applying force in a little bit differently.
That is awesome. And it's amazing just how scientific this has become. I mean, it is biomechanics. It is, the glove in a lot of ways, most people assume that if you're pushing a wheelchair, that you're grabbing the push ring. And if you're grabbing the push ring, you're actually slowing it down to be able to accelerate it. So it's really been mostly a tangential kind of stroke that then catches the ring and then comes back around off the back of the ring. But it sounds like this, and the contact with the glove and the ring is so important because if you're like back with the harness gloves, like the gloves that we had used, which were great gloves and revolutionary in their
Right.
time. But what was so important was squeezing in to maintain the contact. So squeezing in with your pecs or whatever to maintain contact with the push ring, which is tiring, right? So what you're trying to do is figure out a way to minimize the muscles that you use. And what it sounds like with Daniel that's really interesting is that the relaxed nature and the efficiency of it allow him to avoid going into that red zone earlier. So when you're talking about the difference between 17 and 20, that you can't tell a difference, he's not going out there and killing himself to go 20 miles an hour. It still looks efficient. And not that he's not working a little bit harder, but he's avoiding that red zone, which then allows you to sprint off of that speed. Is that some of what you're trying to teach?
Yeah. And that point, it's certainly a, when you move into this position with your fingers, and really, this is the same stroke that they were using in the 80s, frankly. It's funny how we've come back to in some of the earlier days of our sport, in which this point of contact occurs between this knuckle, and then the thumb is kind of wrapping around the ring. I mean, that's no different than what we're doing now, which, as is the case in our sport for the most part. There's nothing new. we're just recycling and using, so it's if likely if you see something, it's been done before. And I think that's the case for this, but in a little different way, because we're not using a soft glove. We're using a solid hand orthotic that positions the hand as we desire. But to your point, which is very astute, is that when we use this position, we offload the flexors of the forearm, so there's less of this movement, right? In terms, because with a flat glove, your point of contact with the ring, you're right, is squeezing in, right? But really, what you're doing is you can kind of dig in on a little bit on the inner half of the ring, but mostly what you're doing is you're pulling the ring with friction between the rubber of the glove and the rubber of the hand ring, and so not as effective as applying force as if you take these fingers and you lock them up under the ring, and now you're driving into something, right? So you're driving into that inner part of the hand ring while you're applying force, and so not to mention that it gives you another 2 inches of reach. So you've effectively increased your hand length by 2 inches, versus with a flat glove, you tend to release right at the base of the thumb, right here where my finger's hitting. Whereas with these gloves, your release point ends up being about 2 inches extended off of where that elbow hinges. So that's another point of value.
Yeah, which is a huge deal, because you're talking about Daniel, who has a wingspan, this 7-foot wingspan. But if you can add 2 inches to your 6-foot wingspan, the difference between being 6-foot wingspan and 6'2" can be a really big thing. And I remember Heinz Fry. I mean, hopefully we don't get too technical. This one might be getting a little bit technical, but Heinz Fry, who in some ways was and is the consensus like best wheelchair racer out there, but it was a really high level injury, and sat pretty much with his knees around his ears kind of thing, but yet he just could go and go and go. But he also had his hands extended and was using some of that plastic, I think, to actually flex the plastic on the gloves to gain some of that mechanical advantage on the plastic, but also gain that distance, that arm length as well. And just as we're talking about that, Corbin Bowe made a comment about remember wrapping batter's gloves or handball gloves, back in the day. And that's kind of what you're talking about going back to, but with far better technology to build and maintain that structure, because those gloves were, you work them in and then they're good. And as soon as you think they're good, then they start breaking down, and you have to figure out how to get them back. So you're in something that's far more substantial. What are you doing? What are you doing now? Like, you have almost 2 months between now and the games. We had the trials. You had some really successful athletes. I mean, you had somebody like Daniel, who seems like it would have been great just to go straight into the games from the trials. Aaron Pike, who looked great, Brian Seaman, who looked great, Tatiana, who's getting better and better. I mean, it seems like she's still, I mean, if you look back at 2016, she could do anything she wanted to, it seemed like. whether it was starting fast, whether it was finishing hard, whether it was climbing, whether it was, everything. And she's had a little bit of time off from injury. I understand she's back at the U of I. You had some other Amanda McRory who's had some injuries and some time off and is back in real life as well, like a working person. So and Chelsea McLammer, who, that was, looking back, I keep going back to those finishes in the 1500 and the 5000 in Rio, where not only did Tatiana, Amanda, and Chelsea sweep the medals, but they not only were they Americans, but they were also from the University of Illinois. What do you guys do between the trials and now to make them prepared?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's really, this last little bit is really a continuation and a final point in this process. So we've had a little bit of a bridge week between our trials, and then we'll get a pretty good block of training in during July, in which we'll dig in a little bit and overload the athletes, and then start unloading and begin to sharpen and really just get them ready for the race. And when I say that, we'll then do a lot of modeling, is what I call race modeling efforts. So trying to mimic scenario situations and demands that they'll face in races, whereas and I contrast that to our block in the next week. We'll not necessarily, we'll be a little more gross in terms of how we're structuring the training and designing each day's session. It will be a little more of along the lines of creating some capacities and just fine tuning that which they've already built and developed. And then it's really just sharpening in and tuning in and getting I guess I just call it locked in on being able to compete and recover.
Yeah. And people often talk about it, right? You're talking about sort of getting to the point where you're not doing quite as much and you're just sharpening. And people often talk about that, the taper, right? And it's like you've put money in the bank and it's gained interest, and hopefully you're able to spend that money when you get to the games. Bob Molinari said that he's two men that he respects a lot. So I just wanted to pass that on to you.
Oh yeah, Adam. Appreciate that. Yeah. So. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's yeah, and so I don't use a traditional taper necessarily. Rather, it's at least I don't necessarily look at like a slow degrading taper or fast, and I know there's some different strategies involved and used, but what I've found really is that you give back the appropriate amount of rest and ensure that they have the tools necessary to compete at their best level. So which oftentimes really means we may offload going into the games just to make sure they're at the necessary capacity, and typically we'll lock back in with some really higher acute efforts and get them in that mode of competing and unfortunately just being ready to shoulder the discomfort. And as you know well, that the path from the start line to the finish line often is has a little bit of pain and suffering involved when you're, especially on the track, so that you need to have the mental reserve to be able to be to tolerate that and be ready to tolerate that to reach your goals.
Well, which is an interesting thing, right? Because psychologically, I never felt like I tapered well. I never did. I just, because you kind of psychologically, you're thinking, okay, this is a big event. It's really important. And I want to feel great. And sometimes it's like you want to feel great so much that you're resting or you're moving slowly or whatever it is, and you don't feel as great as you think you will. So then you're not going as fast as you imagine you could. Whereas it sounds like what you're doing is getting people more into a race type of situation where that's the sharpening part of it. And it's almost like the body kind of wakes up when you get to that rate. It's like, oh, this is something that I understand.
Right. That's the idea. The idea is to, as best we can, expose them to the stimuli that they'll experience during race conditions to the extent that you can, and you know, until you're in front of a racing in a stadium and in front of the crowds, and with those opportunities on the line, that's tough to replicate, of course, in training, but you do your best to model that and prepare the athletes for that situation, so that it almost becomes unconscious in terms of those responses, and certainly in the races where strategy is involved. The more you can create and work on that anticipatory modeling in training, then almost like in a game of chess, they can recognize the environment and respond appropriately to that. So we try to do that, and we're fortunate in Champaign because of the density of athletes that we have in terms of quality and depth, that we can simulate a lot of these things that in other environments you can't do it because you don't have the bodies to do it or the skill set. So we're just so fortunate to have that here, and in which case we can better prep those athletes for it. So.
And I've talked to Scott Hollenbeck, whom you mentioned earlier, who is one of the greatest technicians and probably the most passionate person about the sport that I know. And he talked about back in the day where, you know, Marty would get out on the hand cycle and be able to get them up to 20 miles an hour or whatever, and then would throw somebody at him who would bump him from behind or get him off his line or whatever. And that's part. And obviously, you know Scott, who's a guy who like the more you throw at him, the more he likes it. And he goes, oh yeah, I'm bumping. And I think you guys used to coach back in Atlanta, coach some kids back in Atlanta. And he was talking about getting into the pack with those kids and bumping them from behind. And they're like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's like, well, this you're going to experience it. Be ready. And are you creating those kinds of scenarios? Because I also remember, you know, Marty talking about, you know, calling you to the line and then holding you at the line, you know, and like, okay, back up. And it's like, I mean, I watched the able-bodied trials, the Olympic trials from Eugene, and what was it? I think it was the hurdles where they had like 6 false starts in a row where it wasn't, you know, whatever the mechanism wasn't triggering, right? There was some sort of a glitch in the technology, you know, and you're like,
right.
Okay, hold on. Like I trained for this race. I didn't train to do 6 starts and then do the race. Are you bringing them through, which sounds like hazing in some ways, but it's all for their benefit?
Yeah, I mean, we do. We'll do different drills that simulate pack environments in which the athletes have to run off different situations and respond to attacks off the back, and those are always fun days where you just you pick a baseline speed that's not overly difficult for anyone, and then you have athletes attack off the back, and with the idea that you can't attack until you see their front wheel and things of that nature. Or you know, maybe the drill would be, let's box whoever in, and it's their goal to find a fair and a safe way to the finish line. Those are always fun. Those are always fun days. But yeah, do you, so yeah, Marty used to, and he was a master at it. That we would as we got closer to competition, we would just sit and wait and wait and wait to do whatever, if we're going to do a 400. And, the point of, I mean, it's torture, right? You're just one, you have the anticipation that it's just going to hurt, right? So it's going to, so you're thinking about that. And then
too much time to think. Yeah.
Too much time to think. Yeah. So, I will admit that, I don't do that to the athletes. We do a little bit of rest, but no, I don't do it. As much. And I likely should, but I just think back to those practices when I mean, he knew what he was doing, because that's what you face at the games. It's warm up and then 45 minutes of waiting around the call room and under the stadium, and so,
Yeah.
but we prep them in for that, and do some other things. I mean, we'll do 10 minutes of just hanging out, or thereabouts, but but certainly insofar as moving them into situations where they're able to respond in a way that's low energy cost, and it's predictive, because it's happened to them before. And I will say too, I'll add too, that a lot of this stuff I don't have to engineer. It happens organically, just through whatever training session we're engaged in on the track. Many of these things happen because it's racing, and it's hard training, and these athletes are applying a maximum intention of effort on the days that they're prescribed to do so, and which I think to me is the purest way of creating these skills and habits is just via the organic development and manifestation of it during the day-to-day training. And again, I just point again back to the fact that we're so fortunate to have a critical mass of very talented athletes that are able to train together on a day-to-day basis, and there's always somebody just a little bit faster than you, and and some days that's my assistant coach on a hand bike. So for some athletes, but there's always an opportunity to extend yourself a little bit, and so really it's probably the most challenging part of coaching is ensuring that the athletes don't extend themselves too much in a way that I don't intend them to. Because really they would just bang their heads into the ground and just dig a hole and dig a hole and dig a hole, because that's just their nature. The athletes that train here. So
hard work makes them go faster. So you have to be.
Yeah, it's just like right, and I think the longer that they're in the program, they come to understand that that's really not the essence of skill acquisition and development. Is it's doing it in a way that aggregates quality effort over an extended period of time, and I circle back to the point of tapering, is that I teach that and instill them in that as a habit, is that it's we're going to create high quality efforts that over 2 years to 4 years to 6 years to 8 years to 10 years will accumulate into development and growth, and with an understanding that if you have aspirations to be on the podium or in the finals of a games, you can look at 8 to 12 years depending on your classification and your training age. So it's a long-term vision, and which really is then why the stress is always in the process, and enjoying getting out every day and seeing it as an opportunity to work toward your goal, even if that means on that day you rest, and that's the most effective way to move forward toward whatever it is you're hoping to achieve. But it has to be a part of the daily process and a life habit.
Yeah, and it's got to be interesting too, right? Because I mean, we've talked about some of the dominant athletes, like Daniel, Tatiana, who has 17 Paralympic medals, right? 17, am I getting that right? I think.
That's correct. Yeah.
You know, Susanna Scaroni, who's coming up and who's been really, really good, but is certainly showing a great prominence on the track right now as well. Raymond Martin, who's been great in the T52 class. And you have a wide range of classes as well. So you're talking about there's always somebody who's a little bit faster who can push you a little bit further. You've got what is it, Alexa Halko is there now, right? Who is just, I mean, she burst onto the scene in 2016 at the trials and just is absolutely amazing, but also has some challenges within the world, right? I mean, trying to sort of break down that British wall of athletes too. How are you helping those athletes? You know, because one of the things is going from being like training on your own to suddenly training on the team. How do you make that work and be able to, you know, kind of make it work so that it's beneficial for all the athletes and so that it challenges them in a way that they gain new skills that then they can put to use?
Well, I think that that's my goal when I came on board in 2005 was to create an environment that was conducive to and to be quite honest with you, a lot of times that means that I just get out of the way and I'm quiet and I create the appropriate constraints in the training environment and allow the athletes to adapt and meet whatever demands that I'm placing on them and whatever I've prescribed as far as the training. In which case, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a linear process to improvement. Oftentimes, there's some steps backward, but on the macro level, if we see continuous improvement, I mean that's the performance curve, and so what I've tried to do is almost so it's along the lines of this theory called emergent complexity, and you see it in the ant kingdom, in which you create local motivations, so motivations that are very very tangible and close, and in doing so, you create macro behavior. So if you think about ants, they're not very smart, right? So, but if you watch from afar, it looks like they're incredibly organized. What they're doing and receiving directives, but they're not. They're following the trails that are accidentally, and it's just based on probability, you end up with something that looks really organized, but on the micro level, it's not. So, sorry, that's a little bit in the woods, but that. I
was not expecting you to come up with an
but that's my.
Analogy. Is this some of the influence? It sounds like something that Scott might have turned you on to.
No, actually not. This is just via just in reading and understanding human behavior and motivation and creating organic development without being overly because that's not my style, is to be overly loud or instructive and demanding. One, because I never responded to that as an athlete, and oftentimes I coach as I prefer to be coached, which is let me know what the workout is, and then from there I'll take care of the rest, and I'll learn along the way, and that's what I do for the athletes, and that's not to say that there's not feedback and constraints put in place to direct the athletes and in the direction that you want them to move, but it also is very laissez-faire and hands-off, and allowing the athletes to explore and understand and make mistakes. I think if we perceive the sport as more broadly a vehicle to gaining understanding of who you are as a human being, that there really is no better opportunity than to make some mistakes and recalibrate and much like when you're learning how to shoot a bow and arrow, and you miss the mark, but as you gain skill acquisition, you may make fewer and fewer mistakes, but those always recalibrate you closer to the bullseye. And that's really what I think the beauty and value of sport is too, is that we can create these really empowered and use characteristics of the most noble characteristics of sport to create really good people, and that will help others and move the ball forward.
Well, that's always been a part of your program, right? That it's about going fast, but it's also much more about the athlete, about the person, about the community. And obviously, I mean, I saw that. I remember going to my first camp at the U of I and just seeing a sense of sharing all the information that you guys had accumulated, right? That you're out there doing testing. You have so many athletes that you have a great opportunity to see how training is affecting different people and how they're reacting, but also just like you're talking about creating a standard in terms of the push ring where you're measuring from your knuckle to the head of or the bend of your elbow. That's for me, that's the first time I'd heard that. For me, it had always been kind of like, well, let's see how this one works and see if we go a little bit faster and go. I always push 15-inch push rings, and so I think I'd gone down to 14 at some point, trying to get a little bit more top end speed, and maybe then I'd gone back up to 15, and you've got the start, you've got the top end, and all of these things. So you're trying to figure out how it's all going to work together. But how do you what's the thought when you bring an athlete into the program, or an athlete joins the program? What's the message that you're giving them on the holistic side of things?
Yeah. Well, certainly we honor our sport and our competitors by competing to win, and Twice would run counter to that philosophy. But we also understand that medals and road wins, it's all ephemeral, and there are things that are of more substance and value than that, and so. I hope that I don't have a sit down discussion and say, hey, this is what my philosophy is to any of the incoming freshmen. For me, rather, it's a lived experience, and that is the nature of our program. It is that, and always has been, and it manifests itself in that way. And you see that, and some athletes respond and are a little more immediately, but at some point they understand, and a lot of that has to do with the value of having athletes that are senior and have been in the system for years and can bestow that knowledge and experience upon them, but I think that's it. Is my perspective always is that is to keep Paralympic sport in its appropriate perspective and understand the real value, which, for me, it's competing was always about the camaraderie and spending time with my peers and with people like you and Scott and Jacob Hyville and those camps we'd have in Warm Springs. And those are the memories that are so valuable. I don't remember the Paralympic Games, but it's those experiences and the way that those friendships and people impacted me and made me allowed me to move forward and become a better human being is really that's the essence, and that's hopefully that, and I think it is. I think that's how we run our program and live that experience every day.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. It's interesting to have retired from the sport, and people think, well, what do you miss? And of course, you're going to miss like the glamour of winning and being at the games. And it really, if you think about it, it's sort of like those camps at Warm Springs where it's you're on 2-a-days and you're out there and you're with your buddies and you're busting it every day. And that, to me, those are the moments that I miss the most of all of the things that we did, because that's when, I mean, a couple of things are happening. One, like you're with your friends, you're going hard, or a few things, but then that's also where you're making your changes too, where you're continuing to grow as an athlete. And to me, that's one of the things that was really cool. But as you were talking as well, one of the things that I love about the sort of laissez-faire attitude of coaching is that, one, that's kind of hard. I mean, sometimes it can often be more difficult to say less than to say more. But two, I think what you're doing is you're helping the athletes to own their own journey, their own, where they're going in their progression, and not necessarily being reliant on a coach of, hey, Adam, tell me what I need to do so that I can go faster. Looking at what's going on with the University of Illinois, one of the things is that they've taken such a scientific approach to a sport that really needs a scientific approach, that it's about the efficiency of your stroke. It's about maximizing your strength, maximizing your time on the ring. And so there's the part of the fitness. And then there's also, and as he said, with training with COVID, that they did a lot more training where the athletes were sort of stretching themselves, where they were breaking themselves down a little bit more because they didn't have the races in between. But they're creating that fitness and that strength that then will be benefited in the future. And right now, in the interim, the thing that's so important is being able to sharpen that, to sharpen it, to get race ready. A benefit of having a lot of people on the track is that you're used to having a lot of people on the track. One of the shocks for a lot of athletes is that if you've just been training on your own, suddenly you're in a pack, you're going 20 plus miles an hour going into a turn, and you smell the burning rubber of somebody's tire hitting the frame of somebody in front of them. And it might be 2, 3 wide. And you're trying to figure out, okay, what can I do here when everybody else can go as fast as I can? What are the strategies? And so that's a lot of what they're doing now, is figuring out what are those strategies? What's it like when I'm boxed? What's it like when I'm all the way at the back of the pack? When you go to a games, like some of these athletes will not have gone to a big games.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
How
Right.
do you prepare them mentally, emotionally for the journey from leaving home, flying all the way to Tokyo, which is a really long flight, or a couple of pretty long flights, getting to the village, processing people there? I mean, there's so many other protocols, having to go through mag and bag, the security to get into the village, to get into the track, having the credential. How do you prepare athletes for that? And can you find a way that they can enjoy that process so that they're going to perform at their best?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and other than talking them through that process and explaining what to expect, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can't really. It's hard to replicate that. So um, I just stress that's a big part of the first games, or even a world championships, is that it's getting that boots on the ground experience of I think it's all of that, plus it's going through the warm-up process and going to the call room and sitting, and then moving under the stadium and sitting, and then jumping out on the track, and depending on the year, you had a stadium full of 70,000 plus people. And when does that happen in any other wheelchair track event other than at the Paralympic Games? And so so I think you stress the opportunity to enjoy the process, and and again, those are experiences. I remember the first time that I went through that process, and and some of the more recent ones too. Those stick out, and I think are equally important or as important as the competition between the gun and the finish line.
It is. You can be exhausted by the time you get to the starting line based on
Mm-hmm.
what you've done. And, oh, well, I want to be a
Right.
tourist. And I mean, luckily I mean, not to say luckily, but one element that you won't have is really the families, right? Because the families
Mm-hmm.
won't be in Tokyo. So
Right.
people won't have that responsibility of entertaining friends and family who've come to watch them when they're really trying to do their job. You right now, I mean, we've talked a lot about your athletes, we've talked about your capacity as a coach, but you continue to compete as an athlete as well. Will you do some marathons this fall after you get back?
Yeah, I don't likely. I've little disconnected from that in the last few years, and so yeah, not in the fall, but yeah, maybe in the near future, near future. The last one I did the Disney marathon a couple years ago, and that was fun. That was one of the first marathons that I had ever competed in '96, I believe, and I never finished it because I crashed halfway through. I was chasing down Chantal Petitclerc. This is my first year racing. I hadn't gotten to the University of Illinois yet, so I knew nothing about nothing in respect to the sport. But anyways, yeah, I crashed. So that was always on one of my goals was to finish that doggone race, and so I did that a couple years back. But yeah, it's but I enjoy it. I think that among all the activities that I do to try to stay healthy. To me, the elegance and the artistry of wheelchair racing can't be matched by any other sport, and obviously I'm biased in that respect, but I enjoy just the interface between the hand and the hand ring, and that is really it's just an essence and a real feel of the wheel in a way that is very rewarding.
Yeah, it's immensely beautiful. I mean, as you said, artistry. There is a beauty to wheelchair racing, with the assumption though that you're fit, because the more fit you are, the more beautiful it looks.
That's
The
true.
less fit
Yeah.
you are, the less beautiful it looks. But you also, I mean, just it's funny that you're talking about the marathons and having to go back to Disney to chase, well, not to chase Chantal down this time, but to complete that. But you did a marathon back. Your first marathon was what, like 9 months after your accident? Is that right?
Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, it was pretty soon after. Yeah, my spinal cord injury. Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate to have a great support network around me with my family and my now wife, and that was. I didn't wait around long to get back and engage with first just fitness and health and wellness and training and yeah, I remember the first time I moved back in with my parents after my accident, and just the first time I was really sweating and hurting a little bit, and it'd been a while because you just kind of do PT and walk around and brace and that type of thing, but and that was an anchor point for me. I mean, that was a carryover from pre spinal cord injury that really anchored me back into my identity, and to fill that competitive gap, to do that in racing was and marathoning initially for me. I really just enjoyed the time being out on the county blacktops of North Iowa at the time, and training and just going through that process. So Yeah, and then from there, I think I did
Crashed
three marathons. Yeah, I crashed my first Chicago marathon, finished,
and
and then
still finished though. Got up and
yeah,
finished.
yeah,
This is
finished.
back to
Yeah,
your bloody, it's like,
yeah.
okay,
I just thought that was
buddy, I've
normal.
actually done something.
Right, I just thought that was normal to crack your helmet. But yeah, so I finished that, and then I did. Like I said, I think I did. Well, I did Columbus Marathon, and I did a marathon in Dallas, and I did Disney, and yeah, at that time you just chomped at the bit to do as much as you can do, um, and that was and then I was fortunate enough that I was able to transfer out to Champaign and finish my undergrad at the University of Illinois and learned a little bit more about about the sport
Tried to stay upright a little bit more as well, I'd
more
imagine.
often. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Adam, thanks so much for sharing your story with us. This is, I mean, it's so cool to hear how quickly you came from your accident to getting back into marathons and were not deterred by ending up on the pavement, got back up, kept going. But then also leading so many athletes and having I've always watched you and thought that you had the supreme confidence to be able to not have to say something, and it's great, and it's great that that's
Yeah,
part of your coaching. So
yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks. That means a lot.
yeah, well, thank you for joining us, and good luck, and I hope to make it out to Champaign sometime in the interim between now and when we get to games to be able to check it out and see what's going on. I'm not sure if I'll bring my racing chair or not this time. I'll have to.
Got to
Adam,
do it. I'll go out with you if you
you'll get
do.
out. You'll get out with me. Okay. Okay. That'll be a
Yeah,
good
yeah.
idea. Those gloves
Well,
do sound great though, too. I'm really
yeah,
interested
yeah,
about that.
yep, yep,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, we'll show you. So yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
That'd be great fun. Well, thanks a ton. Good luck and
Thank
best
you.
of luck to all the athletes. I look forward to seeing all of them on the big screen there and going fast. So thank you.
Thanks,
And
Chris.
you're welcome. And thanks to all of you for joining us. We really appreciate it. I realize we did have a little bit of a glitch. Hopefully you got a chance to glean a lot from Adam's wisdom here. And to me, it was an exciting ride through wheelchair racing, through the minutia sometimes of wheelchair racing, through the holistic version of wheelchair racing, which is all about going fast. So really appreciate it. The greatest compliment that you can pay us is to tell your friends. Tell your friends to tune in, to check this out. This will be on the One Revolution page. So if you didn't get a chance to see the whole thing, you can go to the One Revolution page and watch it. It'll be archived right there. We will also turn it into a podcast. So it'll be on YouTube, it'll be on Spotify, it'll be on Apple. And we'd love for you to like us and follow us. And we'll continue to get great people to join. So Adam, thanks again.
Thank
Good
you.
luck. Go fast.